raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with your hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Here we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives solve some of life's complex challenges through understanding the practices of mindfulness and how they can help. Each episode is in an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on authenticity and inner peace. Let's dig in.
For all fathers. For those at the beginning of their fatherhood journey, we celebrate you. For those in the midst of the teenage years with your children, we support you. For those who yearn to be fathers and walk the hard path of infertility, we walk with you. For those who are foster, mentor, or spiritual fathers, we need you. For those who have warm and close relationships with your children, we celebrate you. For those who've experienced disappointment, loss, heartache, and distance with your children, we sit with you. For those who've lost their fathers, we grieve with you. For those who've experienced abuse or abandonment at the hands of your father, we acknowledge your experience. For those who continue to guide their children and the next generation as grandparents, we anticipate with you. For those who are seeking to foster cultures of integrity, creativity, and belonging, we appreciate you. We remember you and need you. I can see from our guest's face, he wasn't expecting that. This is from a Father's Day video from our guest, Travis Goodman. I just love the message. Travis is a licensed marriage and family therapist who is with us today to speak about men and depression, and we're going to have a focus on fathers. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Men Talking Mindfulness. I am your host, John McCaskill, joined by my co-host, Will Schneider. Today, we're diving into that topic that is often under-discussed but profoundly impactful: men and depression, with a particular emphasis on fathers. We're honored to have Travis Goodman with us. Travis is not only a licensed marriage and family therapist, but has a rich background in holistic mental health, and he runs his own podcast, Therapy for Dads. He's got his YouTube channel for that. He's trained and certified in Attachment-Focused-EMDR, emotionally focused couples therapy, and dialectical behavioral therapy. That was a mouthful. Hopefully I got that all right. His mission is to equip us all with the tools and skills for a peaceful, balanced, and fulfilled life. Travis, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah,
I'm so stoked to be here, and I was definitely surprised that you read that. I was like, wait a second, I know this.
It sounds so familiar.
I felt like I was in church or something. It felt like it was like a prayer. So thank you for that prayer. That was awesome.
Again, Travis, we're thrilled to have you on, and for our audience, we're thrilled to have you listening and tuning in, whether that's live or in podcast form later. And thanks for helping us to grow the show and for becoming more mindful. Now, that all said and out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to my brother from another mother, Will, over there in New York City, who has some exciting announcements.
We do have some exciting news. Our merch store is finally open. The Men Talking Mindfulness merch shop is finally open. You can check it out at mentalkingmindfulness.com/shop. So check it out. We're offering t-shirts, hats, mugs, tumblers, and more. John over there, look at that hat. John's rocking one of our new hats, right? And I got to say, so in line with the show and our tagline of being raw, uncut, unapologetic, in full transparency, you may experience some sticker shock at first. You might be thinking, these prices, what's the deal, man? $44 for a t-shirt? What the fuck? We hear you. So here's the lowdown. The price you see and pay covers everything: the print on demand, the plus shipping, handling, and taxes, and like the whole enchilada. And here's the kicker: we're not pocketing a single dime from this. We are just about breaking even. So like Zen balance in the world of the podcast merch, we set up this way because we're all about spreading mindfulness and community vibes, not padding our wallets. So when you snag your shirt or mug or whatever you decide to choose on our mentalkingmindfulness.com/shop link, you're supporting the show, spreading mindfulness and looking awesome while you're doing it.
There you go.
Think of when you're sporting your new MTM merch, it's like a mindfulness fist bump from us to you. So thank you for supporting. Boom. All right. Thank you for supporting the show in this way. And once again, it's mentalkingmindfulness.com/shop. Also, like a couple more things here. So thanks for hanging in there. Also, we're looking to start, we're going to do our episode. We're answering your questions in the form of a voice memo that will be played live on the air. So please, if you have a question or comment, you can send us a voicemail to be played and answered on the show. Simply text MTM to 33777. Once again, MTM to text MTM to 33777. And we're super excited to have you guys voicing the show. And lastly, we're actually now on TikTok. We're using TikTok platform. We have IG, which I know a lot of you guys are on, and also our YouTube. And you can find us just searching basically Men Talking Mindfulness. And that's our announcements. And let's dive into our opening grounding and breath practice, kind of to center and focus the show and, calm down this excitement. And
right.
So we're just I know, right? I mean, that merch short, John, we got merch, man. It's beautiful. So let's exhale. We'll just do 3 simple parachute breaths. Let's start with a nice exhale out the mouth. Easy, easy. Really good. Empty, empty, empty. Let's take a nice big inhale through the nose. And exhale as long and slowly out the mouth. Easy, 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 easy. Good. Another deep breath in. Beautiful. Exhale out slow. Make it slower. Relax a little bit deeper and maybe melt any tension you have in your body. Last one. In with peace. Out with stress. Good. Open your ears, open your mind. And let's jump right in. Travis, thanks for being here. Love having you here with us.
Thanks for doing that quick little breath work to slow down.
Right, exactly.
Clear the mind.
Yeah. Yes.
And
that's why we do it.
I picked up on the in with peace, out with stress. That sounds like a Wim Hof.
It is.
Wim Hof
sorry, I should quote. I'm quoting Wim Hof.
But you have to do it with the accent.
In with peace, out with stress. I don't know if I got that right, but I can try.
Good enough. Hey, Travis, again, thanks for being here. Let's lay the foundation for our audience. Can you give us kind of a brief overview of what holistic mental health means and how it differs from more traditional approaches?
Yes, this could definitely be a longer topic, but the short and brief of it, like the elevator pitch, is kind of moving away from one-dimensional kind of medical model disordered. So, like you have major depressive disorder, or you have postpartum depression disorder, or an anxiety disorder, or whatever quote unquote disorder. Now, the caveat to that is not that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think there's some help in understanding certain, getting understanding like what's going on with someone to better treat someone. But what can happen is I think we could be so one-dimensional, and it's just this medical thing, and it's just you have this just disorder. And I think it become very stigmatizing, and then we can get stuck in these identities, these labels can become who we are. And now there are some people that sometimes that label really helps them and it brings relief. But I think by and large, we need to kind of almost like take a step back and get a more broader picture. It's not just this, you're not this label, this disorder, but there's more to it. And what I mean by holistic is we got to treat the whole person, so if someone's coming in with maybe some depressive symptoms, I'll say, or some signs, I'm not just going to say, okay, take this medication and get better and walk out my door, as the only thing I do. Or, hey, you have this label, here you go, go take this medication and maybe do some basic, do some CBT or some other therapy for 10 sessions and then move on. Now, again, for some people, that might be what they really need. But by and large, what I'm seeing is more of the psychosocial, what is going on? What's the story? How did they get here? Who are they? Who is the person in front of me? And so that's what I mean by holistic. Holistic is the entirety of who they are, their past, their present, their future, their family history. I look at their environmental, their social, their mental, their physical, their spiritual aspects, all these different components that make up the individual. They aren't just this one piece. So it's really just about broadening our perspective, really kind of taking a step back, slowing down a bit, so to speak. Almost like that breath work we just were led through, to really kind of take in what's happening in front of us. And again, there's a time and place for quick diagnosis and quick things. I've done crisis interventions before and triage. It's sometimes a little different in how we approach it because we need something now, and crisis is, again, different mindset. But by and large, I think there's a better need and a more holistic approach when we look at these things, because you could see that actually we can cure depression in a myriad of ways. It isn't just one way. There's a lot of things we can do that I think we don't really look at initially, that we don't realize might be impacting our mood. And when we look at those things, we realize, wow, we could do a lot of work naturally, holistically, that we may not ever need to touch, like medication or a diagnosis. So that's kind of what I mean by that.
Yeah, perfect. Well, you touched on depression there. And the title that's right above our heads here, we're going to be talking about that: fathers and depression, men and depression. So let's talk in general about men and depression. Why do you think that is a topic that's not discussed as frequently, as openly as you may see spoken with among women? And then narrowing that down further, why is it so stigmatized when it comes to fathers?
Good question. I think generally speaking, which you guys have addressed this on the show before, and read in these probably books and heard it, but a big one is obviously stigma and societal expectations, along with cultural expectations around what it means to be, a quote unquote man, or what it means to be quote unquote masculine. And certain things, classically, if I'm going to be very overgeneralizing here just to make the point, men should be stoic, strong, and again, strong in the sense of the narrowed view of strength of you don't show any signs of weakness or vulnerability. You don't show any signs of flaws, and then you got the societal expectations of what it means to be a man, a provider. Again, not that some of these things aren't bad, so hear me out when I'm saying these things. Not that some of these things aren't bad that men were going to do, like they're good things. But when we kind of take it all down and say this is the only way it must look, it must only appear a certain way, and if you're not doing this, then you're not a man, or you're not strong, or you're not masculine. And so what can happen is also how these men and boys have been raised in different cultures, and different cultures have different influences too. Asian American cultures, we got Hispanic, Latino cultures, we got, the typical white WASP cultures. We have all these different cultures also that influence too what it means to be a man. And what we'll see is that I feel like every culture I've talked with, or the most, and there's some sure I haven't talked with, but all the ones we're probably familiar with all have some way of what they say a man should or shouldn't be, and what it means to be strong and not strong. And so as we're doing that, something else I think about and work a lot with too is the area around emotions, how men and boys have been socialized around what they're allowed to feel, what men feel versus what they don't feel. And some of the classic ones are, well, men don't feel sad, men don't feel hopeless or helpless, men aren't supposed to feel confused, all those more distressing emotions or anxious. It's more of, hey, you should just get over it, move on, be strong, get over it, don't cry, wipe it away, let's move on, we got to keep going. That's what men do. And so what could happen is men learn that certain emotions are not okay or not valid. And also I would posit that I think along those lines, men, as they get older, begin to see or relate to certain emotions as a type of threat to their nervous system. And that's something that I'm kind of been working on more with in the most recent time, is really examining their nervous system, and when they're in a sympathetic state of like fight or flight when it comes to certain emotions, or freeze and shut down. So when I think of a lot of men I work with, feeling sad or anxious or stressed is they go into their own fight, flight, freeze, fawn response of trying to navigate it, because those are threats to their system, because they're not supposed to feel these things. They're supposed to feel a different way. And so when these emotions come, they'll get aggressive, they can get defensive, they can numb out and shut down. So they find ways to deal with these emotions, and often in ways that are more harming and damaging in the long term, and often
Sure.
unproductive. And so those are some of the things I see when it comes to men. And then, fatherhood, to niche it down further, is, well, you take all of that, you put it in a blender with kids and not sleeping, and it's like, there you go. All the stuff that you already were dealing with, whether well or not so well, typically, especially in the first 6 months to a year, it everything just gets volumed up past, it's like the amp goes to 11, right?
Right.
And so, Spinal Tap reference, you haven't seen it. Or you get blended up, and so all those things, all those areas that you thought you might be able to compose, it almost becomes you are more ill-equipped, because now those areas of, I don't want to use the word weakness or flaws, because they're not, but areas where we have viewed them in an ineffective, unhealthy manner due to how we were taught, those areas just kind of get amplified.
Right.
And so then we have to really work even harder to deal with those areas that now we're feeling more, because now we're not sleeping, especially in the early phases, or now we're dealing with another human or humans, depending on if we have multiple kids or one, and then our spouses, and just life, and then work stress. So all these other stressors come on, and then what could also happen is then all those other traditional gender masculine roles can get piled on to what it means to be a provider, and what it doesn't mean to be a provider, and to be a dad, not to be a dad. And so then all those things start to boil, so to speak, and begin to come out, and it's going to come out in ways, again, if we're kind of stuck in this very narrowed, boxed in view what to be a man, what we'll see is they'll begin to get holes and leaks in your box, and then you see guys trying to manage it all, and then they get stressed out and overworked, and then they can't keep it together, and so it comes out in ways of like aggression or depression or irritability, moodiness, maybe thinking more, other things that they start to rely on to manage themselves. And then it just becomes really it becomes unmanageable. And then your family starts to feel it, your spouse, your kids. And so it gets to a point where then it bleeds out. And I think these men, when I do talk to them, it's not like they want it to come out, right?
Sure.
I think most men I've talked to are trying to do their best, but then they're just doing what they know, and they're not even aware as well too. There's like kind of this lack of awareness of really what's going on for them, because again, they've been taught that we don't really think or process any of this other more vulnerable stuff, and so we keep it down, and so we don't even examine it. It's like not even on the radar, because we've been taught to not even go there. So we're so good at keeping that stuff kind of contained until, well, it starts to kind of, that pressure just starts to kind of keep it, fight its way up. And I think you shared it. Did you share this on my podcast, John, about the trauma in the basement working out?
Yeah.
I've loved that one now. So
box that trauma up, it goes down into the basement, and there's a whole set of weights down there, and it's just working out and getting stronger, and comes back stronger.
And it's going to blow down that door. So it's coming out whether you want to or not. I think that's the reality. It has to come out somewhere. That energy has to go somewhere.
Right.
And eventually it's going to start to come out. In some ways.
Yeah, and sorry, Will, I don't mean to dominate this, but I'm just
all good.
While we're on that, and now my voice is cracking, of course, because I'm getting all emotional. Definitely turning the amp up, right? Turning the amp up to 11. That's definitely what I've felt since becoming a father. But I've also felt over and above amplifying these expectations as a man. There's also additional feelings that I didn't have before, like shame about even feeling a depression, sadness, any type of vulnerability, because I am the father in the household. And I grew up, one of 5 children. I've got 3 older sisters and a younger brother, and my father's a very loving man, very kind, would do anything for any of us. But there was also that traditional masculinity kind of model in our house, in that I was the fourth child of those five. And whenever my dad would go away, even though I was the fourth child, he would pull me aside and say, hey son, you are the man of the house now. And no, I don't even remember how old I was, but and I found myself doing that with my son now. You know, my son is 4.
Wow.
And you know, I'm saying it somewhat innocently. I'm like, hey buddy, you're the man of the house. But I don't think about the repercussions of that message saying, hey, you are the man of the house. You must provide and protect, even as a 4-year-old. Now as a father, I feel that I must provide and protect, and there is no way that I'm going to add a burden to my family by telling them that I am struggling with anxiety, that I'm struggling with stress, that I'm struggling with sadness, that I'm struggling with finances, whatever the case is. No way am I going to be an additional burden to them, because in that, if I'm doing that, then I'm failing as the protector, because now I'm not protecting them from these. So it's amped up for sure, at least from what I'm feeling. It's amped up, but it's also additional stressors added onto it because of the role of the man, but also because of the role as a father in the family, or expectation that we put on ourselves as the father. Quite often those expectations aren't even necessarily the full expectation. Sure, they might be part, but we put those on ourselves quite often. Sorry,
Yeah, and I see
just
that.
want to get that.
I definitely see that for sure too. Is that those other expectations come in, and those, I think, just again add more pressure to what's already underneath the surface. It's just amplified, and those things could even exponentially amplified, because now it's like it now becomes to I have to be a certain way. Like I should be doing this. Those shoulds and have tos get even bigger and louder often.
Should all over
because
myself.
of what? Yeah,
Yeah,
we should.
right.
We do. We should all over stuff, and that, as we know, that doesn't smell very good. But
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
feel
Will's
good.
gonna say
You know, why don't we stay in the basement of masculinity and fatherhood for a moment? And you know, from your experience working with all these different men and all these different fathers, like if someone's coming to you fresh and you're getting in to know them a little bit better and working with them, it's like, what are some of the typical like coping mechanisms that they implore to, you know, kind of eradicate or at least suppress some of this depression that they're experiencing?
Yeah, I'd say primarily, and I'm gonna use this as a umbrella term, but primarily distraction, and some type of substance. So substance and distraction. So, and substance really is a distraction.
Yeah.
And substances can be anything from what you're probably thinking automatically, you know, the classic drugs and alcohol. I mean, that's where most people, oh, it's substance, you know, they're using substances. We go there. But substances are also other things, like scrolling endlessly on TikTok. You know,
Unless you're on Men Talking
on social
Mindfulness,
media.
if you're on Men Talking Mindfulness on TikTok, you're good.
You're fine. You're good, except for that one. Or if you're on Therapy for Dads, you're good.
There you go.
So outside of those two,
Just those two.
outside of those two,
That's it.
you know, and some other type, I would say overworking, staying overly busy can be, I would view that as a distraction and substance, you know, keeping the mind so active so I can't stop. I can't, because when I slow down, then all that stuff that I've been distracted from now, especially at night when I'm going to bed, now all this stuff starts to flood my mind. And what tends to happen for a lot of these men is that becomes, of course, overwhelming, because it's like a fire hose. And so what can happen is you see these guys spinning, and they ruminate and have these anxious thoughts and worried thoughts, and they catastrophize, meaning going to horrible outcomes, or they get more down and more quote unquote depressed because clearly I'm messing up and I'm not doing enough, and look at all these things that are going wrong or not well. And so, and then they find other ways to deal with it. And then some guys do turn to traditional substances. They might be drinking more, you know, to just shut the brain down. You know, they might turn to pornography more. They might, just watch just a bunch of random stuff just to distract. And so but because what they're doing too, and this is something that I find, and I do a lot of education around men, and I'm so convinced by this now through my training with, over the past few years through the Polyvagal Institute, how important and foundational being aware of our body and our nervous system, how that is really, everything's built upon that. That's like the core foundation. And how a lot of men really are so disconnected from awareness of what the body's saying and communicating in their nervous system. Because a lot of these guys, they're stuck in a fight, flight, activated state, a sympathetic state, or in a frozen state. And what they do is to kind of propel them to regulate as they find ways to regulate their nervous system. So for example, guys coming home from maybe working 12 hours, he's feeling maybe quote unquote depressed or anxious, overwhelmed with all of the responsibilities of being a dad, a father, a partner. Maybe he's already feeling like he's not doing enough.
Provider.
So we get provider, protector, and he's just probably struggling with just stress at work, just all the stuff. And for years doesn't really have a healthy outlet, has been a lot of repression, suppression, keeping at bay, distracting. And so all this pressure's building. And so, he comes home and then maybe his kids they're just being kids, and they're struggling with their little brains developing and their emotional regulation. And so they have a quote unquote tantrum or a behavioral quote unquote problem. And so then dad gets either typically super irritable and yells a lot or screams or whatever, and just has no patience, or just numbs out and checks out and just leaves, and then leaves his spouse by themselves and just like literally exits, right? And becomes kind of a very unhelpful, or again yelling or doing something like that, resorting to kind of threats and punitive punishment because I don't know what else to do and I'm overwhelmed already. And then when that's all done, then he's at night sitting there, and now his thoughts are coming.
Right. Wow.
And then he's like, I'm feeling so overwhelmed and anxious, I don't know what to do. And so I drink. And so what that drink does is that moves me out of my sympathetic fight flight state, but it actually puts me into a shut down dorsal. So dorsal vagal is kind of that's a disconnected state, a depressed state, which feels a lot better. And then kind of an activated up here kind of overwhelmed state. And so we get depressed, but it's not grounded in safety. It's actually grounded in disconnection and isolation. And so that can then propel that kind of depression, and you get more depressed, more isolated, and then you get more disconnected. And I don't talk to my spouse because why would I burden her? Sure. I don't want to be seen as weak. I don't want to put more pressure on her. And so then I don't say anything to her. And often these guys don't have actually good guy friends that they talk to.
Right.
They're just they don't have that kind of relationship. They have maybe guys they kind of shoot the shit with. And again, that's fine. That's bad. But a lot of these guys don't know how or have a roadmap often for kind of what it means to have a vulnerable, intimate relationship with another guy friend.
Yeah.
And they'll write that off. And so these guys are really kind of these solo lone wolves trying to navigate it, and are suffering in their own kind of internal silence. And now people are seeing maybe signs, but they don't see that. They just see that he's angry or irritable, or what, has a drink, maybe he's drinking too much and things like that. They don't really see what's, the boy, so to speak, inside, who's really terrified and hurting and needing someone to see him and be with him. And so we don't see that. And often the spouse doesn't see that. Often the spouse will get the kind of the brunt of the defenses. And then they often react too out of their own survival state because they're trying to survive too, right? And so it creates this tension and everything else. And so it just creates this problem. So that's typically what I see. And I know it's a little narrative, but
no, it's good.
Some people might be relating to that as
they are, man. The comments are coming in on the side here. Thank you for diving into this. This is exactly what I've felt, but worse. So exactly what you're mentioning. So as men, what we're seeing is that we're ill-equipped to properly handle some of these emotions that we may experience. Mm-hmm. So with that, can you share a few essential tools or strategies that men, especially fathers, but men as a whole, can incorporate into their daily lives to cultivate mental well-being?
Yeah. And this is going to be generalized. Typically, if I'm working with someone, it's going to be more specific to their journey, their story. So So in that sense, I gotta generalize it here. But something else I want to say real quick. Another big thing I see is fear. Fear is the big driver of all this. I think fear is kind of, that's what shame is, right? Not enough.
Fear of failure.
Failure, fear of not being a provider. So it's all fear based. And also too, what can happen is some of these guys, by the way, might have tried reaching out for help and then got shamed for it.
Yeah.
And so then they've also learned too, well, I've already tried that. Like,
it's so vicious. It's so incredibly vicious. Go ahead. Yeah.
So then why would I reach out again? I've already, my nervous system knows that's a threat. So that doesn't feel safe to me. And that's all subconscious. So it's, and then when you ask them, it's like, well, I tried asking. You know, I went to this person, or maybe they could try to go into their spouse, and their spouse was stuck in their fight or flight state, and it wasn't a good response, or maybe the way they delivered their help was in an effective way. So all they know is like, I'm not doing that ever again. I'm never going to go down that path.
Right.
Not doing it. You know, and then they get in my office sometimes because they've had crisis or something else happening, and so then they're kind of in that kind of crisis state again. So I do want to say that the fear is such a like undercurrent theme. Fear of being hurt, fear of being harmed, fear of being like, it's just a threat. So,
and real quick, while you mentioned that, I want to put out that fear is not weak, right? Just like vulnerability is not weak. Fear is a natural human response. And, you know, doing something about that fear instead of hiding behind a bottle or social media or not telling anybody, hiding, that's the weak side. But doing something in spite of that fear, going and seeking help from someone like yourself, Travis, going and seeking help from a friend or a family member, and admitting that you are in a challenging time, that is courage, is overcoming that fear, right? Doing it anyway.
Right.
So I just, since you mentioned that so much of what it is that we're experiencing is based in fear, I wanted to just touch on that. Sorry.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that fear too, I think is here, like in our head.
Yeah.
And the other part is the fear is in our body. And that's like that's the polyvagal, that's our nervous system, where it's below our conscious. It's more of a felt thing. So sometimes it's even hard to pinpoint with some of these guys because it's more of an automatic reaction. Because to ask for help is a threat, and that's actually dangerous. So my nervous system takes over and puts me into a disconnected state because that's safer for me. And that's why I would say it's further even from weakness. I would say yes, and it's actually it's an adaptive response to the threat. So it feels safer, even though long term it's actually not what they need. But in terms of the nervous system and the brain, is that feels safer to do this than to actually try and risk the courage, so to speak, of harm again. And that's, I think, a big part of it too.
Right. And you were going to dive into some of the essential tools and strategies before I interrupted.
No, I mean, I interrupted myself because I wanted to add that in too.
Thanks
so much to say. I love it, Travis. Thank you.
And that's the problem is you start talking about these things and you know, it's like, you're like, well, and then there's this, and then there's this, and then there's this, because it's not just a simple answer.
Right.
And you're not to talk about it. Right.
So some things I do. Well, first and foremost, I need to understand who they are. I need to know their story. I need to know all the way back to, I know classic stuff, but I need to know their childhood. I need to know where it began and the relationship. What was the model of emotions in the home? What was the model of conflict in their home? You know, what was the relationship like with their father, with their mother?
Why are those things important, Travis? Like, just to kind of break it down a little bit more, why are those things important?
Well, and this goes to the science of attachment. It is, the science of attachment really is about being born into the world in this sense of safety, that we're supposed to have caregivers that provide a sense of safety for us, that connect with us, and that's physical safety, but that's also mental, psychological, and emotional safety. And that starts off, actually, some would even argue, in the womb, right? That what is mom feeling, thinking, dad feeling? What's the energy of baby coming into the world? That there's definitely some research that have examined that of, can in womb and utero, what's happening and how those emotions and things affect kind of like stress hormones in mom or dad, and like how those affect baby. So that's a whole other thing, but it starts really at that point. And then when baby comes into the world, is actually living and breathing out of the womb, then that starts. And how mom or how dad, how caregivers respond to baby's cues when they're crying. Are they responsive? Do they engage with the baby? Are they timely? Are they consistent? Now, not perfect. It's not about being perfect, 'cause no parent's perfect, but it's consistency and dependable, that the baby learns that mom, dad, caregivers, whoever that might be, their team is they're gonna meet my needs. They're gonna be there for me, and that creates a sense of safety, and then a sense of being seen where I am. So, for example, if baby's crying, it's like I go pick up my baby, and I'm often soothed by physical touch, and I might talk softer. I might say, "Oh, maybe they fell down." It's like, "Oh, you got hurt. Oh, I'm so sorry. Man, that hurts." And so I'm seeing them where they are. I'm acknowledging. I'm validating, which then brings a sense of soothing as I hold them, and I'm kind of soothing their nervous system with my calm nervous system and physical touch and affection and validating them, which then builds in their brain this map of feeling secure in the relationship, that they're secure with us. And that, goes through childhood and adolescence and adulthood. And then even into romantic relationships, we have the same thing, meaning, can I depend on my partner? Do I feel that my partner sees me? Do I feel that my partner now, I can soothe with them, and I can turn to them and talk to them, and they'll meet me where I'm at and validate me, right? That would be considered a secure attachment. And why that's so important is because typically, if someone's coming out with that, I would say, most of I would say majority of those people are not in my office.
Right. Yeah.
Because they've learned that emotions are okay, and that, that
Right.
people are dependable, and that people are trustworthy. Not perfect, but we can repair when there is a rift in the relationship, and we know how to manage conflict and emotions and relationships. And so I know I'll get through this. I'm not really dealing with a lot of shame that I can't overcome. I could probably overcome my own sense of like inadequacy and or shame thoughts, because I've been taught and had these relationships to help guide me and mentor me. Typically, what I see in my office is not that. It's usually, and I'm going to generalize here for men, a lot of guys, is that they were told not to feel certain things, or maybe their parents weren't responding to them in a timely way, or maybe their parents were a threat to their nervous system, so yelling at them, feeling certain things. And so the kid, when they're already in a state of distress, the parents are now a threat to their nervous system, and they now yell at them, or maybe even spank them, or do something else. And so now it's this kind of chaotic relationship, that now what's supposed to bring safety brings harm. Or maybe they're not responding in a timely manner enough that people won't respond to me. And so I learned that, well, people are going to come anyway, so I just got to numb out and check out and not feel. Or my parents are unpredictable, that sometimes they come to me half the time, other half the time maybe they're like anxious and upset with me, right? So it's kind of it's kind of this constant, that's more anxious. So I feel kind of this like I'm unsure, like, do I talk to them? Do I not talk to them? I'm kind of anxious, and gosh, my feelings, I feel like it stresses my parents out to have certain feelings. So I learned, well, I got to maybe care for them now, because my mom or my dad is more upset, and I had a need, but I got it. So then they start taking care of their parents. So those are more the insecure types, right? One is more an avoidant, a numbing. One is more of that kind of anxious, I'm not sure. And the other one is if the parent is a threat themselves, like this is the parent that kind of hurts them, and then also loves them. That creates that kind of chaotic kind of attachment, kind of push-pull, like, wait, you're supposed to be someone who's safe to me, but you're the one actually hurting me physically, or maybe mentally, psychologically. You tell me all these just constant nasty things, but then
or criticism or something like that. Like, I guess,
yeah,
right.
Criticisms like, you're such an idiot, what the hell's wrong with you, like,
Right. Yeah.
you're such a wuss, like,
Yeah. Why are you so stupid? Like, oh
why
my
are you so
God.
stupid, why are you so weak, like, get over yourself. And like, so this is
Jesus.
threat. And so the kid just like, shock. And so some kids fight back, they get aggressive. Some kids get kind of numb out and check out. Some kids just like, I'll be the peacekeeper, make sure everyone's happy, and okay, I just got to manage parents' mood. And then depending on too, if there was alcohol or drugs in the home when they were young, was there divorces and remarriages, what was that like, how did that impact them? Trauma, like actual like physical abuse, sexual abuse, like, mental abuse, neglect, poverty, other things too going on in life, or moving, or maybe they're first generation, maybe there's some trauma from their parents, had trauma from like the country of origin, they're coming here. So all these things have an impact on that kid, on that guy at a young age. And so that's why it's important, because that's the beginning of their story. And that's kind of their initial model that they're like a sponge soaking in, for better, for worse. And then they're trying to figure out their world, and then they go to school and have friends. And what are their friendships like? What are the relationships with teachers like? Are there good relationships? Are there good relationships with teachers? Or is there more harm done in the school environment by teachers that are doing similar stuff? Or, so all these things matter. And as they get older, adolescents, then they have romantic relationships, and how do those go or not go? And then how do they cope? Because often these guys too, they're coping with some type of distraction, getting pornography, dabbling with drugs and alcohol early on, or they're busying themselves, or they find that, hey, I'm a good student. And here's something too, I'm going to say this, that some guys actually become amazing students because that is safer for them. So they become like 4.0, 4.5 students, and they excel because they can control that, and they're reading and they go into these different worlds because that's safer than actual reality. And so they become really successful people in life and develop a lot of amazing things because that was more safe for them. But maybe relationally they might struggle now as adults because I don't really know what to do in intimate relationships. So I might have multiple marriages or in and out of things, so you see it starts to spread. So it's so important because that is the foundation. And then from there I start to build. And then what I do is I come to the present and I say, okay, what do you do now with stress? I got to assess, like, what do you do now? Like, how are you sleeping? What are you eating? Do you have any type of movement in your life? When you come home, what do you do typically on a day when you're, want to de-stress? And typically I'm hearing things like, TV, all this other stuff. So I start just to do basic stuff. Like I look at their nighttime and morning routine. I need to examine that. What is your night and morning routine? What do you do? And start to build in, I would say, more effective, holistic, healthy beginning. So for example, in the morning, it's like, don't get on your phone right away. Do some gratitude, take a few deep breaths. Go make your coffee, take a half hour before you do anything else. Because often these guys are already on their phone. The first thing they wake up, they're on their phone scrolling, and they're looking at stressful work emails or their stressful texts, and they're already stressed out before they even put their feet on the floor. And so their nervous system's already kind of in an activated, oh shit, I'm already stressed out. And then I'm stressed all morning, and I'm like stress showering, and I'm stressed eating my breakfast, and stressed helping my kids.
Showering. Oh my God.
And then your kids wake up, right? And then kids wake up and you're already stressed out. And then your kids, their kids, they don't know what they're doing. So then you might be more stressed because maybe they had a hard day, but you're already activated, right? You're not calm. And so that stresses you out more. And maybe you're already yelling at your kids, and then everyone's yelling at each other going out the door. And then you go to work, and then it's stressful. Then you come home, and then so I have to look at, we got to change.
Do you have a video camera in my house? Because that's no, I mean, I've been guilty of all that, and I totally understand how you can set yourself up for failure from the second that you wake up, and how that has a trickle-down effect to your children, which ultimately affects future men and future fathers. I mean, women and mothers as well. But 100%. This discussion is specifically about men and fathers. So, I've got a little boy who, if I get up and I've been checking my email and my social media and I'm trying to respond to things, and then he gets up and now I haven't had a chance to properly respond to these emails. Now I'm stressed. I'm like, oh, I didn't answer Will, right? About some text message. I don't know. I'm just saying that as an example. And then my little boy wakes up earlier than I had anticipated him waking up. Now I see him and his presence as a threat, even.
Yep.
So it's
and that and that might aggravate you or frustrate you that he's awake.
Yeah.
Like, why are you awake so early? Oh,
why are you awake? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so that's your day. And then if you don't, and then what happens is that your day is you're already, I don't want to say you lost, but it's much harder to recover from that, typically. Because then typically you just go into whatever you do to kind of navigate that stress.
Yeah.
And often these guys, not all, sometimes they have some good things they're doing, but more often than not it is distraction. So I have to do the morning routine, and then what's their nighttime routine, kind of starting there. At nighttime, kind of creating a different pattern. I'm a big fan of journaling and writing thoughts and beginning to examine what's going on. I do implement basic breath work, like kind of Trojan horsing in some breath work of, I may not even call it mindfulness in the beginning, depending on the guy. Part is getting a sense of where they're at. What's the language that might work for them, because certain language, in therapy world is more feminized, and I'm not saying that negatively.
Right.
I'm just saying it just matter of factly, and that the feminine qualities are not bad. In fact, we all got feminine characteristics, but I think for typically these men, it's like, that's not, what do you mean? So I have to change sometimes even the language I approach it, so it's more, digestible for them, and then I begin to kind of get their buy-in and start to implement more things. I do talk a lot about their nervous system. I think that's a huge thing I find helpful for men, because they get that. Oh, I get that. I know what fight or flight is. I know what freeze is. And so I start to kind of teach them about the polyvagal nerve and the vagus nerve and what happened, polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve, and they're like, so it's like they already understand it, so that helps them, and I kind of take them to a deeper level and say, okay, just pay attention. Pay attention if you notice tension, and notice if you're, when your kids walk in the room or coming home, just do a quick scan. Like, do you feel tension anywhere, or tightness or heaviness or anything before you go in the house? Like, yeah, I feel shoulders and neck. Okay, well, just do these, kind of what Will did, a couple deep breaths, and just kind of notice that fall away, then step in. So I'm doing a little basic, just little tools. Do some journaling too. I like kind of doing the high and the low, especially for these guys at night. What's a high and a low moment, meaning something that got frustrated, annoyed, what happened and what emotion did it evoke, just to kind of build that, like, do a rep, so to speak, of lifting that muscle. And then what's a high point, something that was positive, or something you felt took a good stride in, or step in, or learn something new, and what emotion or emotions did that pull up. So trying to see how events are tied to emotional states and bodily states. So I do that too. And then as I do more work, I add in more, maybe longer breath work, more, and then I maybe talk about mindfulness, and then often I do other work too, maybe with EMDR, depending on some of these shame messages. I identify that that not enough, and where did that come from, and so I'll use EMDR and some other techniques to kind of help heal some of that and talk about it. So but again, initially it's morning, nighttime routine, kind of getting a sense of what they're doing well, building on that and saying, hey, let's try these things, giving them basic understanding of their nervous system, why that matters, and also kind of basic other skills that are helping them kind of, so to speak, be in the ocean of emotion, so to speak, so they learn and get some level of comfortability in small doses, and then taking a break, like giving them, like, just do 30 seconds and come back out, like just getting used to what it feels like, and getting them a sense of agency, and that they're feeling like they're building a muscle, and then start to kind of add more. So those are just some quick things I do, and then I'll tailor it as well, depending on the person.
Well, what does that look like? I mean, we told you what it looks like, but the average man that you might work with, like, how long would it take them to start to adapt even just one thing? If you have a guy that's like 40, 50 years old, and he's been running the same program, doing the same things, like, being that provider, protector, conqueror role all the time, showing no weakness, no vulnerability, being a lone wolf, like, and finally this man wakes up for some reason, and they step into your office, like, how long from your experience, like, does it take them to take that first step of, like, not turning their phone on in the morning or something like that? Like, do you have a gauge on that, like, average, if you can?
Oh God, I feel like a lot of those questions are tough, because there's such a variance
so unique,
to that, like, with every person, and it depends on their willingness to trust what I'm saying, and, like, do I have their buy-in yet?
True. That's a big deal, right? That trust, that imagine, has to be, because you said something earlier I thought was very telling, and I'm doing some work with men. I have a workshop coming up here in New York City on September 24th, just for men, and, like, one of my biggest conundrums and things that I'm struggling with is, how do I speak to these men in a way that doesn't threaten this programming of the man box, or whatever we want to call it, or this toxic masculinity, or whatever language you want to use to talk about this confined masculinity that we're describing. It's like, it's so, we're supposed to be so tough, but we're so incredibly sensitive. Anyway, thank you, Travis, for dropping in here, describing this, or talking about this average man, if you will.
Yeah, and it's not always easy. I think one thing with that, you said toxic as masculinity, is that first and foremost, masculinity itself is not toxic, and
No,
I've learned to change my language around that too. I think it's a marketing term. It catches people's attention. I get it. It's all over social media, and it's like other terms too. People misuse it, but I think there's some truth in what they're saying, but I think it also is misrepresentative, and it leads you astray from what we really need to get at. I think more so it's like that one-dimensional view of masculinity, or what it means to
Yes.
be a
That's
man.
that's
It's
what's
like a
toxic
very
about this. I think, Phil,
The
that's the way that
confined
I like to talk
masculinity right
about
there.
toxic. Yeah, talk
yeah.
about toxic masculinity. It's like when you only are able to experience life in like 3 or 4 ways, and all the emotions that come with those, and that's the only emotion you have. That's toxic to the soul. It's toxic to the community. It's
Right.
toxic to everyone around you. But yeah,
It's
go
talks to
ahead.
everybody, and often these guys are
Everybody.
they're in survival modes. I think that's the part of that is that these guys often don't know it.
No.
Initially. Now some might, when they're coming to my office, they have an awareness, something clicked in, like, ooh, I need help. Like something just says I need to come in and I'm finally here. But all the other guys typically are stuck, and so that's the hard part, is how do you get them in, and the time frame really changes. I've seen some guys come in and they just hit the ground running. I mean, week one, I like to give guys assignments, and they thrive on that. You go do this and come back and report how it's going. And some guys
Yeah.
don't. I mean, again, that's why I have to tailor it to the individual.
Right.
But I've seen guys come in and they start it and they start to notice it. Or sometimes they're doing it and they're like, Travis, I feel like nothing's different. I'm like, okay, that's what you're noticing. Great. So it's actually working, right?
Yeah.
So you're just aware that this is a hard thing. It's hard to do these things. And so it's actually, that tells me it's working. Now we got to redefine what movement looks like in this world, that it's going to feel like there's not a lot of movement, and maybe that what you're used to, it's not going to be like, oh, you're going to go into that gym and lift like 4 plates on each side and do, a deadlift. It's like, good luck, right? I mean, you have to start with the bar here. So we're doing bar exercises. I know it, and we have to redefine that's doing work right now, and
Right.
and having some humility and ego of like, hey, this is just, and right now this is hard. Right now, this is hard. That bar is that's the heaviest thing you've ever lifted right now, as far as in this world of
Yeah, sure.
emotions. And so we have to start with where we are, and acknowledge the work we're doing, and looking at the strides we're taking, the small steps now, and we have to start to almost change our perspective and look at it as that's a victory. And I think a lot of men, we get stuck in that, like, well, it's the not enough thing. So I even help them identify their shame message too, and like, hey, where's that voice coming from? And
Great.
and I would say, hey, if you were talking to a buddy that you really cared for and loved a lot, what would you tell him? And often they would say, I would never say that to that guy. I would never tell him he's an idiot or stupid or worthless. I would never say that. And I'm like, well, you're that guy, and like, that's the friend technique. And they're like, yeah, but it's me. I'm like, okay, we'll work with that. We'll keep working. You have the yeah, but,
Yeah.
but, and so it's little by little, and some guys do take longer. Again, it's I had one guy I'm thinking of it's a combination of some, but it took a good 6 months of really doing a lot of work. EMDR, had little movement, but constant panic attacks daily, issues with losing weight, a bunch of other stuff, and food issues, and it took a good 6 months. And in this case, we did need to also implement some medication because it was that bad. And so we needed some other kind of, boost of, neurochemicals and things like that to help shift on top of the work. But this was a guy who was desperate, and he did the work every day. But it wasn't like within week one, he's like, my life has changed. No, we did weekly, hard, like intense, I guess it's like doing buds, but for the mind, right? Buds training, but for the mind. And we were doing it, like really, really doing it. And now, I mean, gosh, like we worked really hard for 6 months. And then at 6 months, it's like really things it was a huge, like all of a sudden increase. And then we started just kind of riding that wave, so to speak.
Nice.
And things really started to shift. And we started doing more deeper work, but then he felt a difference. But it was like a good 6 months before there was really any felt difference. But he kept doing it, and that was the key. Like, he kept practicing, even though he's like, I don't really feel like it's doing much. I'm like, I get it, trust me. And he had that trust, and we just kept going. And now it's like, I don't even see him anymore, which is great. He graduated, and that's one of those amazing things. You get to see someone, their whole life is different and better and changed, and they're doing their thing, and they're flying, so to speak, on their own, which is such an amazing thing to do and to be part of as a therapist, is to see that happen and be like, yeah. And now he's like, yeah, you're right, it was hard, but I'm glad I stuck to it. Like, now I might go share your story with other guys, other friends that because your story is now going to impact them better than I can impact them, because they're going to see the difference in your life. And that's the beauty of this, is that they get to now impact their families, their friends, their work, a whole area of influence that I would never be able to touch. which is the coolest part of this process.
Well, like, was this guy a father? That you're talking about? Yeah. So what was that experience like with his kids then? Like, how has his relationship changed, if you have any specifics about that?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, he definitely would have reported that it's actually significantly better. I think a big drive for him was his relationship with his kid is a big reason why he came in. I think that kept him going when it was really dark for a while. It was like that was the light, so to speak, that he clung to, of like, this is why I'm doing it, is for my kid. And it definitely, the relationship changed too, obviously, as he got healthier. The relationship blossomed more because he realized, in a way, unintentionally, just from his own stress and stuff, was just missing the mark quite a bit with his kid, and more easily frustrated and annoyed, and just the relationship just at times would have more distress between it. And now, obviously, as we got better, he night and day difference, more time and enjoyable time, and with the spouse too. So he was noticing it with the whole family. And now very different, more peace, more calm, more connection, more relationship. And then it's funny, his focus shifted too. His focus was more on his work initially, of the provider. I got to do more and make more. And it shifted, and I didn't even tell him to do this. It just kind of naturally one day, he just said, something shifted in me that, yeah, that's important. But he's like, actually, what I'm realizing more and more, that I've been trying to chase this thing, is trying to fix everything else. I'm realizing that actually got me worse off. And what's most important is my relationship with my kid and my spouse. And that like, it was a huge shift on his own, that just the work we were doing, it clicked. And then he's like, yeah, I know I need to make money because we got bills. Like, so obviously there's that, but he was trying to prove his worth in his job. And that a lot of it was driving too, was childish stuff with parents and dad, his dad, and trying to be enough. And so he was trying to find it in, how much money he made, how much was in the bank, having a certain house and a car. And that became this kind of really just bottomless hole pit of trying to prove his worth. And so as we did that deeper work, it like began to shift from, yeah, I know I need money, but really it's about my kid and my spouse at the end of the day. And then that he would, I remember when he came in, it was like I felt the energy difference when he sat on the couch. I was like, oh, there's something different. And he's like, yeah, it was, and he felt it. He's like, there's something I've been chasing. And he's like, I feel so much just at peace, even though there's a lot of unknowns in life. I'm like, it's okay, because I'm investing here and having boundaries around work. He's like, it's the first time I've done this. It's like, I left work at 6 and I was not looking at emails till 12 o'clock at night. He's like, I just told them no. And I'm like, good for you, man. And so he's like, because guess what was there the next day? The same emails. He's like, I just was stressed about it. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Right.
So it was really cool. Like, he was one of my favorite cases to work with, just for seeing just a massive shift in his entire family life. So I'm excited. I haven't heard from him in a while, but maybe one day he'll reach out and say hi again. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that shift that you just mentioned, that's tied very closely to an episode that we recently did with Michael E. Long, one of the co-authors of The Molecule of More, all about dopamine, and how dopamine can be good and that it drives us to continually progress, but we can get addicted to it and we never reach that point of enough, because we're constantly looking for more and more and more, no matter whether you have, the nice truck, the nice home. If you have that nice truck, now you're going to be looking for a Lamborghini. If you have a nice home, you're going to be looking for a castle. If you have a castle, you're going to be looking for a castle on the moon. And it's just continually getting more and more. And with that, we never reach that enough state, right? And the other side of that is the male ego that's tied to being that provider. Quite often we convince ourselves that we're doing it to be the provider, but when we really peel the onion back a little bit, why are we really doing it? It's for validation, like you mentioned. It's for validation of who we are. And I've been guilty of that myself, and I discussed that on your show, is that it is sometimes driven by, going back all the way to the beginning of the conversation, driven by who we were as children and who other people were in our lives as when we were children. Definitely lots to unpack there. Now, that said, sticking with kind of the depression theme, I want to talk about if
I know. Say great. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No, it's important. That's what we're here to
No,
talk
I know.
about.
No, I know. I'm sorry.
So, the sticking with that depression theme, for friends and family of these men, of these fathers, what are some of the signs and symptoms that may be displayed, or what should they be looking for someone who might be silently struggling? I think we've touched on a little bit of that, but if we could specifically focus on that.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah. So for some signs and symptoms that you want to look out for, and as a quick caveat, dads too also do suffer from postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. The current stat is 1 in 10, so 10%.
Wow.
And I'm sure that's not even accurate, because
it's not reported.
It's not reported.
And men probably aren't talking about it either. So
Yeah.
it's
No, they're
probably
not.
way
Yeah.
under.
So it's a thing, and that comes, and what can cause that is, sleep deprivation and, all just the stress of everything else. Also, men do experience hormone changes, by the way, which is, most think like, what? Hormone changes? Like, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Angiopause, right? I think it's called angiopause. Is that right? Yep.
Yeah. So it happens, but again, most because of lack of education. And so just to say that's a real thing that men do face, just like women, and it's more prevalent than we think. Even for women, it's actually much higher. It's much more common than not common. And it's not that no one did anything wrong or bad. It's just that it's like the shift, unfortunately, with the shift of change, and then not sleeping, and how that could is, by the way, like torture, and it can put you in a depressed state.
Yeah.
And so, but some of the other signs, I would say, some classic signs for sure are, especially on men, is more irritability and higher frustration and anger, especially if you notice a shift, maybe how he used to be, and now you're just noticing he's more irritable, more easily frustrated, just yelling a lot more. You're seeing a shift. That's one sign. Now you want multiple signs. Just because he has it, by the way, may not mean he's depressed. It might just mean he's stressed out, right? But that's a sign. Some other signs are maybe he's eating less or more. Maybe he's drinking more than typical, or maybe picked up drinking. Maybe wasn't drinking before, or maybe was drinking like once a month. There's now drinking like every other day or daily. Other ones would be noticing maybe he's pulling away, and again, some of this is just becoming apparent, but maybe outside of that, he's maybe isolating more from relationships. Maybe he's maybe not engaging in certain things he used to do, like for enjoyment. Like maybe he used to play music or guitar, but he hasn't touched the thing in months, but he used to play all the time. Or maybe he used to also have some other hobbies, I don't know, like taking photos or camera, or maybe he collected rocks or something. I don't know, whatever he did, or tinkered in the garage on his car. And maybe he doesn't do that anymore, just isn't really doing anything. You might notice too, he might be more, maybe just kind of sluggish and slow too. That's the other way it could look for some guys. They maybe not more irritable, but maybe they're more kind of just slower and just not really, they're more checking out, kind of more absent-minded. They might, when you talk to them, they might almost not seem like they're paying attention and kind of zoning out. They might ask, hey, what did you just say? Having you repeat more stuff more often than not. And then some of the other ones too that you might not know that's happening internally for them is they might be feeling more feelings of guilt and worthlessness. They may not be communicating, probably won't be communicating that to you, but they're feeling more guilt and worthless. They might be feeling like they have lower energy and they're more tired. They feel like, even though they might be sleeping, but they're just drained. They might be struggling with completing work tasks and home tasks more, like just not completing as much and really slowing down. And on, other times they might struggle with suicidal ideation and thoughts too, on the more extreme, if they're really, really depressed and down, like that just starts to kind of fill their mind more, and that becomes more serious. So those are some of the things that the signs and symptoms to be looking out for, some of the classic ones. And for some too, like erectile dysfunction too, and low libido, low sex drive. I do, but also becoming a new parent, that's also sometimes that's just part of the change as well, by the way. You're not having sex as much, especially the first 6 months to a year, if not more, depending on so there's all these things. So you can't just look at one and say, oh, they're depressed. you gotta examine all these things and kind of assess, and then I would say be curious and approach them not out of blaming or shaming, but just kind of noticing and just asking and you might have to ask them a lot because you might need to retrain their brain that you're a safe person.
Yeah.
They may not trust it yet to be even asked or to be honest because they've been asked before and they're used to kind of just not saying what they think. And so you might have to just listen with curiosity, ask repeatedly. Don't say, why are you so lazy, or what's wrong with you, you're not completing a task, right? Like, it's more of, hey, I'm just noticing, like, you're just more tired lately, everything okay? Because again, we might approach it with, you're not doing as much, and so then, or why are you so lazy, or why are you so irritable? Like, even though that's true, it's like if we go there, it's just you become a threat to their nervous system. And so we want to actually come in and be curious. Hey, I noticed you've been more, I noticed that maybe you've been yelling more with the kids. Are you okay? Everything going on?
Yeah.
I know I yell to some of the kids too. We all have those moments, but I just noticed it's a little more. Everything all right? Like, how's work? How's, and so, and they might still say, oh, I'm fine. And that's okay. Keep asking, right? It's almost
man
like
response.
Yeah, it's no, I'm good. Again, I don't, because again, that comes to
I'm
that.
fine.
I'm fine, right? Feelings inside not expressed, right? So,
oh wow, I've
I'm
never
fine.
heard that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Feelings inside not expressed. So, fine is, I love, that's my favorite response. People come sit in my office. How you doing today? I'm fine. I'm like, okay. Let's talk. And so
break that.
again,
You should say that again a little slower. Fine. I just want everyone to hear this. Might be on our shirt, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Feelings inside not expressed.
I love it.
I'm fine. And again, that's because that's part of their defense too, is to not show that they're weak or a burden. So they're gonna say they're fine, especially if that's where they are, if that's their thing. So I'm gonna be fine. I don't want to burden you. I can't trust that, so I'm gonna say I'm fine, because that's also keeps me in survival mode. Is I got to tell myself I'm fine.
Right.
I gotta keep moving. I gotta keep going. And so you might get fined for a while, but I think the more you listen with genuine curiosity, trying to understand, noticing, pointing stuff out, behavioral changes without like a threat. Like, I just noticed you haven't, I just noticed you haven't played your guitar in a while. Like, what's going on there? Like, whatever you notice about them, you start to point out the behavioral changes in a way that's kind of asking to help them understand. Help me understand. I'm noticing this. How are you doing? So, because then it starts to help them see it too, because they may also not see it. Sometimes they don't notice the change, but you might. So those are some signs and symptoms.
We had Reinventing Masculinity on, the authors of that show, and Ed Adams has this group called M3, right? And they have just one rule of M3, and it's like, no man shames another man. That's it, one rule. And just through that, I mean, so it reminds you what you're talking about, right? So if you're going to approach somebody with, be like, dude, why are you being so fucking lazy? It's like, what do you expect my reaction to be, right? Or why, versus like, hey, like you said, approaching them like in a kind, compassionate way, and just trying to, get on the inside a little bit, and see them, as a loving human being that needs help, instead of like looking at them as a problem and shaming them, with
why are you so lazy? That's criticism, right? Why are you so lazy? You never help. You're always this. You're always angry. Well, there might be truth to that. That's just that's not meeting them where they are. And I'd reverse it, like, what if someone came to you that way, like you said? What if they? Is that actually a question, or is that like they just shot you like with an arrow? Like, like the Gottmans talk about this, right? They would call it a harsh startup. The Gottmans, 50 years of research on couples therapy, that's a harsh startup. That's criticism. That's going to put you into the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Which I'm going to defend myself, I'm going to numb out. And so you want to do a soft startup. Hey, what's going on? Help me understand. I've noticed this. You tell me about this. It's the other analogy I give is when you're doing this with a guy, and imagine playing, you're throwing a ball back and forth with him. You could ping a fastball at his face, and he might catch it, if he's skillful. But he also might just get smacked in the face with the ball, and that's just not going to feel too great, and you're going to just like get him pissed off. Which I'd be pissed off too if I get pinged in the face with a fastball, right? So I'm going to go in defense mode, and it's I'm going to go into fight flight and probably just like yell back or throw the ball back. That's part of the famous. So and then we get mad at him for getting mad that we pinged a fastball at his face. Or if I threw the ball like completely opposite direction of him and then got mad for not catching the ball, right? So
Great
it's
analogy,
like,
man.
okay, we want to toss our partner and I teach this to men too, actually, all the time when they're talking to their spouses. Like, you want to toss your partner a ball that they can catch, or at least have the opportunity or capacity to catch.
Yeah.
So when you're throwing ball back and forth, you're just tossing the ball back. You're not pinging fastballs unless they know you're doing that. But you're throwing the ball back and forth. It's nice. It's slow, and then here's the thing too. When you do that, if you throw the ball and it misses them, you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you," right? Because you take responsibility for the bad pass, not blaming them for not catching it, right? So it's that's the imagery of like, imagine just playing catch and just like slowly, just okay, we're going back and forth. And that's okay. And you have to do that for days, but eventually, I might talk about this. So
it goes back to the crucial conversations episode that we had about how to have those conversations, right? And like, it starts with setting the tone and making it safe physically and psychologically for all participants in the conversation. And then what's the goal of the conversation? Is the goal of the conversation to win the conversation, or is the goal of the conversation to have a positive outcome for all the parties? Typically it's the latter, but more often than not, we fall into trying to win the conversation. So it's unfortunate. Well, let's see. We've talked about the symptoms. If family members are seeing those symptoms, how to even approach that. What about if there's listeners that are seeing those symptoms in themselves? What would you recommend for them as the first step in addressing those feelings and seeking support?
I mean, the first step, I would just approach yourself with just compassion.
Love it.
Not that you're broken or flawed or not enough, all those shame messages that might be flooding you, or failure, or all those things that come in, because typically when we're there, we tend to get this hypercriticism and kind of internal critic that just beats us up. And so first I would start to change that and approach it with genuine empathy and curiosity, like, wow, okay, this is kind of you, and okay, take it as a sign, not as a bad thing, but as an opportunity to say, okay, wow, I'm having some language now that's clicking with me and starting to make sense to what I've been experiencing. And the reality is there's help for this. Now, it may require a therapist. It may not. It might, depending on where you are. It might mean you have someone you can talk to. But I know that some of you may not have that. And so sometimes a therapist for some people is the first person they can actually talk to that listens to them with genuine empathy and validates them. Because a lot of people I've talked with, their family, you turn to your family, like, no, sometimes family is the threat. Sometimes that's where the abuse is. And so I'm not, I'm not going to turn to them. And so in some cases, like they don't really have anyone that they know they can turn to, because that's where all their trauma and pain came from. And so sometimes that therapist or like a coach or something, maybe you have a teacher. Some people have like a boss that they feel safe with. It just depends on the person, but you got to start with curiosity, genuine empathy and compassion for yourself. Know that there's help. Know that this is something that's fixable and healable. Know that there's different paths to get help in this, whether it's with a clinician. Obviously, if you're more extreme and you're having maybe suicidal thoughts and things like that, then I would recommend maybe reaching out to a clinician, just because they're gonna have some more training on better assessment and helping you give some skills and tools to really help that, and really look at you more effectively, just from our skill set as experts in that, of knowing what to look for. But if you're not that extreme, if you're just noticing some of these things, do that. Maybe start journaling, maybe recording how you're doing, what you're feeling and thinking in your head, and start writing some stuff down, like, how am I doing? Maybe start changing some of the stuff we talked about today, and like, what's your routine and how do you talk to yourself? Are you shaming yourself? Like Will said, like, that's a great group rule, but that's a great internal rule for yourself. Is like, how are you talking to yourself?
Excellent.
Like, what do you tell yourself? Have you taken on all those messages, negative criticisms, and like, that's just the voice in your head now that you talk to yourself that way? And that's one of the first things I would say is start to catch and change, even if you don't believe it yet, but start to change that internal dialogue, because that's toxic. That dialogue that's the poison. That's going to eat you up inside.
Amen.
Those are some things I would say.
Right on.
Thank you.
Let's see. Well, I want to respect your time, man. You've given us so much great stuff here, and I love what it is you're doing. For our listeners, what's the best way for them to find you and find your podcast, find what it is that you're doing?
Yeah. So a couple places. One, Instagram. I have a presence on there. Therapy for Dads, and that's with the number 4. That's on Instagram. That's also the name of the podcast, Therapy for Dads, which is on Spotify, Apple, Google. And then I'm also on YouTube as well, which I put up both podcast episodes and other just mental health content. And that's just my name, just youtube.com/Travis Goodman. Goodman is how it's spelled, Goodman. And that's where you could find me up there, which is, again, mix of podcast episodes, clips, and then just other mental health kind of holistic content of teaching, education, and skills that I go through. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me and find me and message me and ask questions. I'm more happy to, point in the right direction or respond. I think I'm a friendly guy.
I've got to point out the I was going to say irony, but it's not irony. It's the fact that your last name is Goodman.
Oh, it's branding. I can
so
tell
perfect.
it's branding.
Did you change your last name for the branding?
I was thinking the same thing.
No. I tried registering that domain name, but I have to pay like whatever $100,000 from GoDaddy or something. I couldn't. I tried to do Goodman Therapy, and it just didn't. It was already taken because. And so, domains. I gotta love domains,
man.
Right?
It's a scam. Don't you wish you'd bought a whole bunch of domains back in the 1990s?
I have actually.
Have you sold any?
A bunch. I'm waiting. No, but maybe someday.
That's hilarious.
You never know. It takes one time someone to make it like I'm gonna pay you this.
I'm squatting.
Yeah, good for you.
Too bad you're not squatting on Men Talking Mindfulness. So that's the best way to get a hold of me, and John will be on it here. I'll be releasing the episode soon, and I need to have Will on to complete the. There you go. Complete the circle.
I need to complete the circle of life.
Well, awesome, brother. Been fantastic having you. For those who tuned in, thank you for tuning in live. For those who tune in later in the podcast, thank you for listening. We appreciate you as our audience. We sincerely appreciate you. And if you've gotten something out of this episode, which I know you did, please share it with your friends, your family, your colleagues, whoever you feel could benefit. Please give us that review and subscribe. Now I'll turn it over to Travis to wrap it up with a final grounding practice, and then we will say goodbye.
Okay. So walk with me on this one. This is, I guess for some of the men, it might be a little like, why am I doing that? But just bear with me and trust me. I ask for your trust on this one. But first, like Will had us do, just notice the chair you're sitting in, or if you're in your car, or if you're on your bed, listening and laying down on the couch. Just kind of notice. Take a breath and just notice the contact you're having with the surface you're sitting on. And as you breathe in, just kind of notate the sensation. And as you breathe out, just acknowledge and just observe what it is you're sensing. And just notice how that holds your weight, holds your body. Notice if you have any tension in kind of your back or thighs or glutes, shoulders. And if you have any tension anywhere at all, just acknowledge it. And as you breathe in, just kind of focus the attention on that space of your body, maybe even tensing it a little bit more. And as you breathe out, release that area, that muscle, that tension, allowing it to kind of sink into the chair or the surface you're sitting in, kind of like it's kind of getting washed away. And now we're going to practice a little self-compassion. So I want to take your right hand, place it on your chest and heart, and take your left hand and kind of place it on your cheek and under your jaw and cheek, and kind of almost like you're holding your head, and almost maybe even lean your head a bit on that hand as you're holding your head up. As you're holding your chest, just notice what that feels like to be held. And kind of breathe into it and just relax into the hold of your hand as it holds its face and its chest. And this is a bodily act of safety and compassion that you can give to yourself every day, no matter where you are. and begin to hold yourself, not harm. And take one final breath, breathe in deeply, and slowly exhale, dropping your shoulders. And you can release your face and your chest and relax your arms. And open your eyes when you're ready.
Thank you,
Beautiful,
Travis.
brother. That was
really
awesome.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Great conversation today.
I knew
thanks for
Will
having me on,
would
guys.
appreciate the compassion piece. Will's been in this really intensive self-compassion course, and everything. Yeah, it's fantastic, man. So thank you for wrapping it up with that. And Will, I'll turn it over to you for any final words, brother.
Well, just like what I'm learning in this compassion course, when you do bring your hand across your chest, you actually get a little serotonin, oxytocin actually drip a little bit, so you feel that. So that's really a great technique. Just touch, just a little bit of self-touch and a little bit of self-kindness, a little bit of breath can remind you that you're valuable, that you're enough, and you deserve to be in this world. I teased a little earlier. I have this workshop coming up here in the city on September 24th in New York City. It's in person. It's called the Betterment Project. If you want to learn more about that, you can just head over to my Instagram, and my handle's at Will Not Fear, WILLNOTFEAR. And I'm going to be, I'm excited, Travis, to do this. I have this is part of the compassion work I'm doing with Stanford University, and I'm going to be doing a men's only workshop. So it's only men for this. And I'm excited and nervous as fuck, honestly, to put this out there in the world.
You're going to crush it.
Being vulnerable. I know that's what everyone keeps telling me, but it's like, oh my God. But I just want to put that out there. And Travis, thank you for all the work and all the lives that you're helping and the message that you're putting out there in the world. And thank you. And thank everyone listening out there and helping other men, keep this conversation going with the men in your lives and the people, and just instead of shaming somebody and saying what the fuck is wrong with you, right? What if you just ask and be like, hey, if you need I'm here to listen, or I'm here to help. So thank you guys. Thank you. This has been a great episode.
Until
I really
next time,
appreciate your time.
Take care, everyone. Peace.
Thanks, guys. Peace. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.